श्री स्वामीनारायण भगवाननी जय, अक्षर पुरुषोत्तम महाराजनी जय, गुरु हरि प्रमुख स्वामी महाराजनी जय, गुरु हरि महंत स्वामी महाराजनी जय. Weeks into this coronavirus crisis that the world is facing, we as a humanity have suddenly understood that never in the history of mankind we have faced such a crisis of such proportion and such magnitude. Something that we could never have dreamt of. Of course, there have been huge plagues, Black Death, influenzas that have taken toll of hundreds of thousands of people. But that was still limited to a certain geographical area or to a certain place. Even if it was pandemic, it was limited for a certain time where people were still trying to struggle to find a way. There have been wars, but wars were limited to a few countries or maybe a continent. This is perhaps the only calamity or catastrophe that has affected the entire world. More than 200 countries, despite their diligent efforts, with all the information and intelligence that we have in the medical area, we as a humanity are still struggling. Individual families are completely at mercy. There's a huge amount of fear, maybe through rumors. There's a deep trauma. We as a people are really trying to reach out to each other through compassion and care to find a way. The religious heads are inspiring their following in a true spiritual manner, not just to keep respectful distance, but also to adhere to all the rules and regulations given out by health protocols. The world leaders themselves are making an effort. I know the decisions are difficult, harsh, sometimes draconian, but I do feel that everybody has a good heart in trying to find a solution. Education system which has been disrupted, businesses which have been disrupted, international relationships, even internal relationships. Imagine if somebody in the family contracts this disease. How do they behave? How do they relate? So there are moral, emotional, social questions, including spiritual questions that keep coming to our heart. But one thing is for sure, that somehow through vaccines, treatment, medicines, special health protocols, or somehow through social protocols like respectful distances, changing of our hygiene and habits, we have to evolve a system that will help us overcome this entire disease. And I think it's possible as man understands whatever we are trying to do, as we develop and get greater knowledge, something will appear. But I also want to share with you that instead of creating fear and panic, instead of creating a reactive response, instead of just hanging on to rumors and imagination, we need to breathe in more patience. The issue has become more of response and reaction versus patience and proaction. Patience and proaction is something that man is equipped with. Every person on this earth, God has given us this ability to be patient and also to be proactive. What we as a morally responsible person, as a morally responsible family, as a morally responsible country, what steps we should take to actually curb the spread of the disease. And I think more than just simple sporadic response and reaction, patience and proaction is really going to help us coexist or also overcome all the ramifications of this disease. One simple example would perhaps highlight this, and I'm not here to say that this is an example which is like the ideal, but it'll probably help us understand how we should shape our patience and proaction. I would like to term it as the cockroach conundrum. Once in a very hot climate, there was a cockroach and he was trying to escape the heat. It crept under a door, and it happened to be a high-end restaurant. Really cool inside. Feeling comfortable, the cockroach goes into this restaurant and sees an empty cushion chair. It flies onto that chair. Next to the chair, there's a little boy, and he sees the cockroach and he starts screaming. Because of sudden fright and his frantic movement, the cockroach flies from the chair onto the lapel of the boy's father. The father, with a manly swipe, shoos off the cockroach, and the cockroach, struggling for its own existence, quickly jumps on to the hair of his wife. Of course, the lady, with all her food and everything arranged on the table, she throws a tantrum, screaming at the top of her voice. She jumps up, and the cockroach, again feeling that, oh, this is not a comfortable place, it flies high and just lands onto the platter of a waiter. Seeing a cockroach coming in from nowhere, the waiter himself throws the entire platter with all its dishes, food, and silverware. And there's a complete chaos in the whole restaurant. To avoid the cockroach, almost all the people who had come for their food were quietly eating, jump up, and there is pandemonium. Straight away, people are running helter-skelter, there is chaos, there's noise, almost a riot, and suddenly everybody starts for the exit. In the meanwhile, the cockroach probably feels that, oh, this is perhaps not the right place, and he sees a small space in the window and he slowly creeps out of the window. Now I want to really ask you, the cockroach doesn't even know that man exists. The cockroach hadn't really come to disrupt with a vengeance or a master plan of disrupting the entire restaurant. It was just looking for a host. And as it crept in, suddenly this entire chaos happened. Yes, the cockroach did create a disruption and difficulties, but the cockroach itself was not the root of the larger fear and chaos. The larger fear and chaos that occurred in the restaurant was because of the sporadic response and reaction of all the human beings there. We can choose to react to this entire crisis because it's a serious crisis and it's taking a great toll. We can choose to react in a completely fearful way, irresponsible way, through rumors, through imagination. But we can also choose as civilized human beings in a more moral way, full of patience and with pro-action. Because this virus technically is not even alive. And it does not even know whether man is alive or dead. It doesn't even care for our existence. In its simple process of proliferation, it infects and disrupts anything that crosses its pathway. And I believe that to be more responsible, we probably need to change the outlook of our life and lifestyle. Let us remind ourselves of a very meaningful conversation between India's most popular and loved president, Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam, and His Holiness Pramukh Swami Maharaj. In 2001, just before he became the president, he had come to Pramukh Swami with an idea or a map in which he said that he and 500 great thinkers from varied fields across India had been discussing for more than 1 year in which direction that India should develop by 2020. Mark the time. Somehow prophetically he used the word 2020 for developed India. And he had told Swami Shri, I happened to be there as the translator, he had told Pramukh Swami that I believe that India should develop in 5 areas. Now imagine the first area he said health. What is happening today in 2020? Suddenly health has become very, very important, a top priority. The second area he had said, education. Today as we sit at home, we're all struggling with the education of our own children. The right education, the right awareness. So education is also very important. The third area he said was agriculture. If lockdown continues, I think we should also understand that countries which have the capabilities of producing its own food will suddenly become important. The families that can generate its own food, farmers, will suddenly become a better way of living. So food and agriculture is going to be very, very important in coming days. Kalam had identified first health, which is important now as we see it. Second, education. Third, he had said agriculture. Now imagine, before I go on, I want to tell you, Kalam was a nuclear scientist. He never said nuclear energy. Kalam was India's missile man. He never said armaments and missile. Kalam was a space scientist. He never really talked about landing on Mars or moon. It's important. I'm not saying that's not important. But as we see today for our own existence, health, education, agriculture is important. The fourth area he identified was communication and information technology. We feel as a common human race through our ability to communicate with each other through information technology. It's coming to the fore. It's very prophetic. He also, as the fifth area, he said critical technology. He said technologies that enhance human life. He didn't talk about the luxuries that we live in. He talked about technology like biotechnology, nanotechnology, genetic engineering, anything. He talked about technology that creates medicines. So technologies which are critical for the existence of the human being, that is the area with which we should develop. So he identified health, education, agriculture, communication and information technology with infrastructure, and also critical technology. To this, Pramukh Swami Maharaj, very spiritually, he said, tell Dr. Kalam that something is missing. I was a little hesitant to tell him because imagine one of the finest thinkers of India when he tells you that along with 500 thinkers, we have come up with a plan after thinking for 1 year. What more can you suggest? But Pramukh Swami, he was deeply spiritual, a very enlightened spiritual master. He said, tell Dr. Kalam that there is something missing, add a 6th dimension for the development of any country or the world for that fact. He said, Dr. Kalam, add faith in God. Faith is very important for churning out morally and spiritually sound human beings. You could have the best of technologies, the best of healthcare, the best of agriculture, the best of education. But if you have morally and spiritually barren human beings, then that would be the worst of a country. Human beings actually constitute to the world, not the things we create around us, but the things that create us. Ultimately, in this crisis we do find, just as health is important, education is important, food is important, just as communication or connection is important, and just as all critical medicine and technology is important, our own morality, our own spirituality, our own faith, whether it's faith in God, faith in man, faith in the systems that we've created, that is going to be our life-saving. And I do believe that this faith will give us hope higher than hope, faith higher than faith. And I believe that just as in the past, God has given us this ability to find a ray of hope and then seek sunlight and the sun. We together as a human being, when we stop blaming countries, when we stop blaming systems, whether the virus was a conspiracy or whether the virus is a natural event, it's knocking on our doors. It's there before us. We need to find out ways of facing it, overcoming it, rather than keep blaming and living in the past. For us to have a great future, we need to really have greater faith in God, in mankind, in our own abilities, and in the strength of our unity, and still create a system, a lifestyle that would help us succeed.